Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be featuring a new map that is actually in the game, unlike my previous two videos. This one is not in the ill-fated recon game mode. This is actually in the game live now in update 1.14. This map is called Safe Haven, and it has gone through a series of names, and in fact, in your replay files, if you go and look at them, it's still called the Japort map, because I guess it is a Japanese port. So, Safe Haven. I'm going to be playing through a game on it first, so you can get an idea of what the combat is like, and then I'm going to be giving you a flyover to give you my initial opinions on the map, maybe give you some tips and tricks about where you might want to try and focus in your different vehicles, and also about what I think the meta will be on this vehicle. Oh, not on this vehicle, on this map even. And also some of the pitfalls that I would recommend you avoid so that you can get a head start on this. Alright, so firstly I'm playing in the new Tier 8 Premium Czechoslovakian medium tank. It is a Skoda T56. And after having played this vehicle quite a bit this weekend over the last few days, I can tell you this thing is outrageously good. It's a combination of it kind of being able to do everything, especially if you set it up in the way that I have with a turbo, with vents, and then your choice of something to improve the gun handling. I'm kind of using a rotation device on this vehicle because I feel like its intra-clip reload of 3.5 seconds doesn't really mean that you need to have vertical stabilizers, although they definitely do help. However, I would only recommend doing this if you have a bounty rotation device on this vehicle, as that is like 50% better than the regular rotation device. And 15% on this vehicle for the traverse speed and the dispersion is pretty good compared to the 25 you would get for a bounty vert stab. I found that when I also unlocked Wargaming's new field modifications on this vehicle, that putting in a turbo in the second slot and choosing the mobility for the second specialization just notched up that mobility even more. This vehicle's power to weight ratio isn't actually the problem, as you would have found in my tank review. It's actually the top speed limit, so everything you can do to try and pump that up can make this thing really flexible. But we can talk about all of that, but really, when it comes down to it, it's the fact that if you get those perfect shots aligned up like that against the TS5, you're doing 1,000 damage in 3.5 seconds of each other, and then you've got awesome damage per minute with 1,936 base to be able to reload and go again against the Kampfpanzer for another 500 damage. And then hopefully we're going to hit the next shell. We do. We hit the Lansen even though they were out of our render distance, and we even set them on fire as well. And just like that, we managed to get 2,000 damage in pretty much about 30 seconds in this vehicle. And that is what's absolutely terrifying about this tank. This 460 alpha damage to me just feels as if it's a little bit too high. And while its accuracy is not bad at 0.42, you can still make it work even against moving targets at a decent distance, of course, unless you get ridiculously unlucky. The times that this vehicle has frustrated me, yeah, at times when I've been aiming at the lower plate on a Lerva like yesterday and I miss both of the shells even at a distance of about 50 meters, this gun is definitely not dependable. But if you can tame it and you can kind of harness its raw power, there's just nothing that really compares to it. And what a vehicle's really meant to do, if you've also got the armor to be able to ricochet them, what's that IS-2 going to do? They're on full hit points. They're kind of just trundling towards this vehicle. I guess the answer is to never get caught out about the tank. I feel like this vehicle, for me, in retrospect, kind of needed either less alpha damage or a longer reload to be more vulnerable, because your opportunities to be able to attack this tank just doesn't feel long enough. It's not vulnerable for enough time, and yet it's absolutely punishing most of the time then, because it's not reloading for very long, right? This thing undoubtedly is the best tier for tier of the new Czechoslovakian heavies, and it just so happens to be the premium one, right? The tier 10 is also decent, but look, I'm not going to spoil it because I'm going to be talking about that all on my inaugural Czechoslovakian Tech Tree Showcase, which will be happening later today on Twitch. Unfortunately, this isn't the only auto-loading heavy at tier 8 that's dangerous, as the Emil manages to get above me, bounces one shell, and puts the second shot in. And in the first 5 minutes of this battle, we're up to 5,000 damage in a tier 8 tank. not too shabby right. I just wish that this Emil, who seems to be exploring the tunnels of this map, as we're probably going to highlight in a second, would, instead of explore them, maybe try and explore damaging some of the enemy tanks, because we're down by now 3,000 hit points in this game, and it's going to be a tough one if we want to be able to come back into it. So unfortunately for me, I managed to get spotted just as I'm trying to make him a flanking position up here to try and get a shot into the Emil. Maybe at the top, or alternatively get some vision at some of the vehicles towards the south of this map. And hello, Mr. Indian Panzer! Now this vehicle's got 8 degrees of gun depression, and these kind of high grounds on this map do pose for some fairly interesting World of Tanks combat. This is a very unusual situation to kind of be in, where somebody's on top of a building and you're fighting them. I don't think that's really possible on any of the other maps, at least that come to mind. So it must be a fairly unusual situation, right? Unfortunately, I don't have 12 degrees of gun depression like the Emil does, and so I'm unable to be able to depress the gun to be able to go after the Indian Panzer. And here's that 50-100 who harassed us earlier, but we did actually manage to ricochet a lot. We put 1 round into them. Looks like they miss a shell. We're going to put our 2nd round into them. We're going to bounce a shell off the front of our tank. I'm unfortunately getting blocked a little bit by the mill, but to be fair, he's not trying to. He's trying to get out the way, so he's not doing anything wrong there at all. And we just dealt 900 damage to the AMX 50-100, securing 6,000 damage in this game, and hopefully getting a high caliber in it as well. Unless I've done some team damage, although you can't really do team damage in World of Tanks now, but maybe I accidentally shot an ally, or maybe I bumped into an ally, and that will actually take away a high caliber medal inside the game. Now I want to show you a very interesting moment here. Look at where my turret is facing. Look at where my turret is facing. I'm going to zoom out again so I can show you. I'm facing the Emil, but something absolutely bizarre happens. When I actually take a look at the wreck of my tank, as we can see here, my turret is not facing the Emil. So what I think might have happened here is a desync from the server, where maybe because of the packet loss and the ping that there has been in World of Tanks recently, maybe the game thought that I was actually aiming at the wall when I was aiming at the Emil, and that allows him to actually get a shot into the side of my turret, whereas, as you clearly saw in the replay, I was facing my turret directly towards him. Although, to be fair, if we look at it from the Emil's perspective, he could have shot me anywhere in my side armor, and no matter how well angled the side of this tank is, look how curved it is towards the top, it isn't going to be ricocheting an Emil from that position. Alright, so 6,000 damage was not enough to be able to win this game, but without further ado, let's take a look at what the Safe Haven map has to offer. So I'm using a mod here, Pmod, to be able to get a nice top-down view for you all, so you can get an idea of the symmetry of the map. So there's a big road that stretches towards the south of this map, as we can see going across here. There's lots of avenues of attack. It's not like many maps of World of Tanks, where all of it is focused into 3 distinct avenues, where there would be 1 at the top, 1 in the middle, and 1 towards the south. And some maps don't even have 3 clear avenues. They've only got 2 clear avenues in this day of World of Tanks. This one, Safe Haven, does feel like it's a bit of a kind of a sprawling mess of different avenues that you can be able to attack the enemy base. And when I say a mess, it's probably only going to feel like a mess until you've played the map hundreds of times, as you will do over the next few years, as long as it does stay in the game. And I use mess in the nicest of words. Mess maybe because now we're a little bit inexperienced, but later on I feel like its intricate details could actually make this probably one of the more fun maps for a variety of tanks. So currently on this map, there's lots of different ways that you can approach to attack your opponents. I've had success with 2 or 3 different clear approaches. So my first big tip is that there are 2 barges on either side of the map which you have to be able to traverse over to be able to access these avenues that I'm going to show you. Now, these barges, it's very important that you don't go one way and then decide to cross to be able to go the other, otherwise you're probably going to be set on fire like the IS-3A at the start of the battle. If you want to go along the north and fight across the dock, then make sure you take your time to go over and use the northern side of the bridge. I know this sounds very simple, but don't be a muppet like this IS-3A, otherwise you're going to get caught out and there's going to be a tremendous amount of crossfire. If instead you want to go the way that you saw me play on this map, make sure you go towards the south of this barge and then you can sneak around here. You might take a shot or 2, but especially little walls like this will be able to help you out with being able to avoid that and take the top of the hill. So the first avenue that I've been liking to use on this map is the attack across the north. Now, I don't recommend that you kind of sit here and chill, especially if you're in a top-tier heavy tank or a top-tier tank destroyer. Try and get across. From here, you can try and work this corner. It's fairly safe, unless your opponents manage to get up there, and then you're a bit of an issue if they shoot down the door, and you can get lovely crossfire from this position. Be warned, though, because tank destroyers love to sit up in this corner of the map, or at least I can imagine some sneaky tank destroyers are going to, and this completely denies the possibility for you to be able to progress across safely. And it's the same for the other side. As you can see, there's a TS5 who's managing to get to the back, and while they don't really have the sneaky position, they've still got some container crates they can try and chill behind and be able to get a little bit of crossfire. But yeah, that is a sniper's nest that I expect is going to have quite a few good games on this map. So after you've managed to try and attack through this north, really it's about holding, trying to get a crossfire and just be annoying and trying to dig out any tanks that maybe have made mistakes. Yesterday I was playing and there was a chieftain on the enemy team who I progressed into this position to be able to get a lovely crossfire on. But then eventually they went up here and then they had an absolute god tier position. This position I think is kind of crazy good, if not I would say OP, because there's no way to be able to sneak up behind it. The only way to approach it is from the front, and unless the enemy team managed to get the high ground, then this is a very safe opportunity if you do spawn on the west of this map. So if you don't want to fight across the north, there's the opportunity to make this play towards center. Now this position, it can be very strong. You can kind of try and come across here and then shoot your opponents as they manage to come up and create a bit of a kill zone. The issue with this is that if any of the enemy vehicles have managed to get over here, it's kind of like a pretty awkward fighting position. I have no idea why Wargaming have decided to only give one team a lovely opportunity to go out on that ridge, and really this position doesn't extend far across. The enemy, for example, could be able to sit up in this position and get crossfire everyone down there, whereas the opportunities for the team on the east is, yeah, far limited. But I can imagine that the map designers now would be saying, symmetry is so boring, we want the map to be different, so it feels like you play it different from either side. Yeah, but when you create a plateau for people to be able to sit on and farm, it doesn't really feel like it's fair, and sometimes symmetry while it may be boring, it's actually pretty darn good for having each side having equal opportunities. The problem with coming up on this plateau here is that if any of the enemy team are situated towards the south, they are going to have a great crossfire on you. And while you saw me absolutely ripping and tearing through the enemy team as they drove across in the open, as people become more experienced, they're probably going to realize that's not the best thing to do. And instead, don't be lazy, go round the high end, and then you're not going to get shot from down below. So this is really kind of the heavy tank and the tank destroyer playground in this area. It's all about crossfire. It's all about advancing. There's not really too many hold down. Well, there are some hold down positions, but they're more kind of corners for Soviet tanks to kind of only expose their turrets, or Swedish tanks as the case may be there. This area of water on both sides really does create a bit of a squeeze point. A choke point maybe, but it's more of a squeeze. It does feel like there's a lot of opportunity to play around with the docks, and then suddenly, boom, you've got to try and make your way through the middle of the map. And that's kind of tricky because quite often they're going to be hull down in situations like this. They're going to have lots of lovely positions to sit in, and it's quite painful to try and be able to make that push. But if you do, then it could be fairly useful. The way that I've found to have success on this map is to start early, maybe in positions like this, try and see if you get to farm anybody with the crossfire, but not really to push across. Then I'd recommend maybe even falling all the way back and then trying to hope that your team has got some positions up here, or maybe even take the positions up here yourself. I feel like the heavies, it doesn't feel as if it's going to be a clean cut through for either team. I think it's going to be a back and forth event unless you just have a numerical advantage, or maybe you've got some top tier tank that plays really well. So enough about the heavy tanks. Let's focus on where more of the, well, I guess the fast heavy tanks, or the medium tanks and the light tanks are going to play, maybe with also some of the tank destroyers. And that is the hill up on the Safe Haven map. Now, this map really does favor a lot of speed. If you're able to get some speed, then you're going to be able to get these buildings up here. You're going to have some wonderful vision and hold down opportunity. And if you can try and take this hill here, you're fairly safe from pretty much every scenario. But the enemies are still going to be able to attack. And do you know why they're going to be able to attack? Because they're going uphill. That sounds a bit weird. You know, usually like having the high ground is an advantage. And it definitely is. But when the slope is shaped like this, it's quite tricky for the enemies to be able to come around the corner, apart from using bushes like this. And I do feel that if they're at least in decent enough tanks, they're going to be able to push all the way up and take the corner of the map. Undoubtedly, however, it will be an advantage to be on top of the hill from being able to shoot down at the rest of the map, as I quickly found holding positions like this and using the rocks and the bushes in these scenarios is a great way to be able to get crossfire down below. But with the way that a rock like this is shaped, if you want to shoot at the heavies, if they do manage to spot you, then you're going to get absolutely clapped by all of the medium tanks and tank destroyers that are situated up around here. This map doesn't really have too much impassable terrain. There is a little bit towards the south and there is an area towards the west and obviously the water up towards the north, but it does feel like it's quite a large playground of a map. There is more than enough room for a wide variety of vehicles, lights, mediums, or tank destroyers, or your faster heavies, to be able to get up on the hill, use some bush locations, use some ridge lines, and as I said, it is kind of a mess of avenues where you can be able to attack your opponents. There's lots of opportunities to be able to attack right along the edge of the map, or you could try and bypass it and go towards the center. I would never recommend to use this bridge. The only time I would recommend to use this bridge is if you want to probably have a grisly demise very quickly, or if you are in the fastest of light tanks and you see the enemy team maybe making their way towards the edge of the map and you want to try and have a bit of a sneaky run, possibly towards the enemy self-propelled guns, who are likely to be hiding in these positions back here. Wargaming always put these little dips and these ridges at the back of the map where the self-propelled guns are likely to be hiding in. Be tricky to be able to spot them out. One thing I'd like to mention about this map is that if one of the heavy teams triumphs and they manage to actually progress towards the enemy base, it is quite tricky to be able to make the push up towards the hill. There's lots of opportunities if they still have their medium tanks or tank destroyers up there for them to rain death down upon you. However, you are able to cap fairly easily as long as you try and use these building locations. Interesting that Wargaming would have literally just put about a 3 or a 5 meter gap between the edge of the circle and the building where you truly would want to go to try and get some cover and force your opponents to be able to commit. But all in all, I do feel as if this map will be quite easy to cap by the heavy tanks, and it will force the mediums to have to come down off their hill, which I think is good map balance. If there wasn't this building inside the cap circle, or if there wasn't a lovely position which you could sit in here, then it would be just a simple case of everybody going up on top of the hill and just sitting there and camping out, and it would kind of play out a bit like a Malinovka. If you've spawned on the east and you've made your way towards the enemy's base over towards the west, again, you've got a big building that's going to be able to protect you and to force the enemy to have to come down and attack you. And when they do, just imagine these lovely positions here for your heavy tanks that have reasonable amounts of gun depression to try and farm those mediums as they're forced to come back off their hill to be able to attack you. Each time I've played this map, however, the heavy town fight has been a stalemate. I think except once. I think 1 out of 5 times the heavies have actually managed to win. The vast majority of the time, for me so far, it's been the medium tanks and the tank destroyers towards the south of the map that have been more progressive and then inevitably come down and start to flank the heavies. If you can manage to make an aggressive push, I honestly think pushing through the town, if you can outnumber your opponents while you might lose some hit points, will actually allow you to progress faster towards the enemy base because it's a more direct route. It's very short if you just go from one base to the other, but it's quite long to be able to go up towards the hill and have to inevitably take the high ground towards the edge of the map to be able to avoid getting into a crossfire. Because, of course, you want to secure your flanks before you decide to try and push through to take new positions. So that's my look at Safe Haven. I think it's a pretty good map so far. It sounds very vague. I've got to play it a little bit more. I think it's a map which has a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different tank types. There are some positions which definitely do worry me, like this plateau up here for the heavies. It does feel like it's going to be a tricky one to be able to counter. I also don't really like the idea that Wargaming have put positions in and then made these doors openable to allow hull down tanks to be able to just get crossfires, to try and almost feel as if the whole of the northern part of this map is a little bit irrelevant, apart from maybe getting 1 or 2 tanks up here to be able to get a bit of a crossfire. All in all, however, I'm really excited to be able to notch up a load of more games on this map. And again, it is quite exciting when you can actually have combat inside buildings in World of Tanks. And while this will definitely be an avenue and an opportunity that a lot of players will want to try and progress towards, usually, let's be honest, it's just going to end up with a stalemate with people waiting on corners like the Skoda and the Carnarvon at the start of the game. But I guess if you're able to catch your enemies ill-prepared, it will be a pretty snazzy opportunity to be able to take the tunnels, and then whoo, you could get some meaty crossfire on your opponents if you're able to achieve that. But you better be in the biggest and best heavy tank to be able to survive the gauntlet run to be able to achieve that. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my look at the new Safe Haven map. Hopefully this gives you a few bits of a few tips and tricks to be able to take all of your vehicles on it so it's not so mesmerizing. And if you knew it already, well, at least I hope you enjoyed QuickyBaby being a tourist on the latest map in World of Tanks. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it goes live on Sunday, later on today at 8 o'clock server time for the European server, it is going to be the Tech Tree Showcase, the first one ever for the Czechoslovakian heavy tanks, which I have been grinding hard since they were released on Wednesday to be able to get ready for today. And so come along if you want to know everything there is to know about the new Czechoslovakian heavy line, which vehicles are great, which vehicles are awful, and also you get to see me play a bunch of rounds in the tier 10 Brute, the VZ55, with its 1000 damage, 2-second burst double tap. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing you all live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.